The forgotten don't stay forgotten forever, sometimes. It just takes the right moment to remember them. What would make a judge rise from his bench in stunned silence? Let us know in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that honor our veterans. The bailiff said the name like it meant nothing. Martin Bedingfield, please step forward. Martin didn't flinch. Didn't move at first. He was used to being overlooked, used to people not recognizing that the name still belonged to a man, not a ghost, not a statistic, just a man, albeit one hollowed by time, poverty, and silence. He stood slowly. The worn canvas jacket he wore sagged around his shoulders, sleeves soaked at the cuffs from last night's rain. It hadn't dried by morning, neither had his socks, but he'd stopped noticing the chill in his toes about 2 winters ago. Martin stepped forward as the room of pre-trial suspects watched him pass with indifferent eyes. No one knew who he was. That was fine. The judge didn't look up from the papers before him. Martin knew how this would go. He had been caught swiping food. A loaf of bread and a small block of cheese stuffed into his coat at a run-down corner store. The manager had been furious, the kind of furious that came from being worn down by theft and poverty in his own right. The cops were called. No one asked Martin why. He hadn't explained. Didn't matter anymore. Behind him, the public defender rustled through his notes. Your Honor, my client has had no permanent residence for over 10 years. He has prior infractions for loitering, trespassing, and petty theft. Today's incident is... Martin didn't hear the rest. He focused on the judge's face now, curious why the man still hadn't looked up. The nameplate read Judge Daniel Whitaker. Sounded vaguely familiar, but names blurred together these days. Names of old comrades. Names on marble walls. Names on tombstones. Then Whitaker raised his eyes. Something paused. A flicker. The kind that barely catches a whisper of air but leaves a storm in its wake. Whitaker's expression didn't change, but his fingers froze mid-page. Martin noticed the hesitation, but didn't read into it. Judges always paused, especially for people like him. The courtroom moved on. The prosecutor continued her request to detain him. Given the pattern of repeat offenses, we're requesting remand without bail, Your Honor. The defender pushed his glasses up, glanced at Martin, then added with a rehearsed sigh, Mr. Bedingfield has no history of violent behavior. We request supervised release to the VA's community program, assuming they still have a bed. A beat passed. And then the judge's voice, low and measured, Mr. Bedingfield, where did you serve? The question cracked through the court like glass under pressure. The prosecutor looked up, confused. The defender blinked. Martin's lips twitched, uncertain. Excuse me? Whitaker leaned forward. There was no mistaking it now. His eyes searched Martin's face like someone reaching into a box of old photos. I asked, where did you serve? Martin swallowed. Iraq? 2nd Battalion, Army. Which unit? Echo Company, out of Fort Benning. The judge didn't speak for a long moment. Then he stood. No sound, no gavel, just the creak of the chair and the stunned silence of the courtroom. Everyone turned toward the bench. Whitaker's eyes were wide now, locked on Martin's with something far beyond duty. He stepped down slowly, walked toward the defendant's stand. Martin's shoulders tensed, not out of fear, out of memory. The judge stopped a few feet from him, spoke, this time barely above a whisper. Fallujah, 2006, Operation Iron Reaper. You pulled a corporal out of a burning Humvee, held off insurgents until evac. That corporal was me. The room didn't breathe. Martin's jaw shifted. He remembered now. Not the face, but the voice. The panic in the man's screams, the heat of the flames, the copper taste of blood in his mouth from the smoke and shrapnel. He hadn't thought of that moment in years. Not because it didn't matter, but because too much else had buried it. The judge exhaled, then turned to the courtroom. "This man isn't a vagrant, he's a decorated war hero, and you are all ready to let him slip through the cracks because he looks like a statistic." The prosecutor stood frozen. The defender glanced down, ashamed. Whitaker turned back to Martin. "You saved my life." Martin didn't reply. His face didn't change, but behind the guarded eyes something flickered. A recognition, not just of the judge, but of himself. Something that hadn't happened in years. The judge returned to the bench, his expression grave, hands folded tightly on the wood before him. Martin remained standing, unsure if the moment that had just passed was real or something imagined, some hallucination brought on by hunger and sleep deprivation. The courtroom hadn't moved. The air had gone still. It was the kind of quiet that came not from reverence, but from confusion, from watching a system that always operated predictably suddenly bend in an unfamiliar direction. Whitaker cleared his throat. "Mr. Bedingfield," he said slowly, each syllable deliberate, "before we proceed, I need a recess. 5 minutes." The gavel tapped once, light and precise. The bailiff moved to guide Martin back to the holding room, but Whitaker raised his hand slightly. "Just enough. No need. He stays." The courtroom emptied in a dazed shuffle, murmurs trailing behind the departing crowd. Only the judge, Martin, the defender, and prosecutor remained. Whitaker leaned over to speak quietly to the clerk, who nodded and left through a side door. The silence returned. Martin didn't sit. He wouldn't without permission. That part of the training never left. Whitaker broke the silence again, this time as a man, not a judge. "After I came back, I spent a year in a hospital bed. They told me I'd never walk again. Said the burns were too deep, the spine too damaged. They were wrong. But it wasn't medicine that did it, it was memory. I remembered your voice shouting through the fire. I remembered your hands dragging me from that wreck, even though your leg was bleeding like hell and you had shrapnel in your side." Martin shifted uncomfortably, eyes lowered. He didn't respond. He'd stopped accepting thanks a long time ago. They never lasted. They didn't pay rent. "You disappeared after that," Whitaker continued. "You went back out while the rest of us were medevaced. Your name never showed up in the recovery ward. I figured maybe you died." "I tried," Martin said. His voice was low, scratchy like gravel. "Didn't take." That was the closest he'd come to humor in months. The judge didn't smile. "I looked you up a few years back. Couldn't find anything. No obituary, no records, not even a phone number. Like you vanished." "I guess I did," Martin replied. The public defender finally spoke, hesitant. "Your Honor, if I may, are we still proceeding with arraignment?" Whitaker looked at him, the lines in his face more defined now. "You may sit down, Counselor. We're not done here yet." Angela Pierce, the prosecutor, folded her arms across her case file. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the man is still charged with petty theft. We can't dismiss based on a personal connection." Martin finally turned toward her. His eyes were tired, hollow, but something inside them sparked. "You think I wanted to steal?" he asked, voice dry. "You think I woke up this morning excited to shove a moldy loaf of bread under my jacket?" She didn't answer. 30 minutes before they picked me up," he said, "I was sitting in an alley behind the old tire shop on Grant Street. You know that one?" He didn't wait for her reply. "I found a dead rat by the dumpster. I was going to eat it if I couldn't find something else. That's where I'm at. That's what it's come to." Angela's face hardened. But it wasn't malice. It was discomfort. She hadn't expected this kind of testimony. She wasn't sure what to do with it. Martin's voice didn't rise. He didn't try to elicit pity. He just spoke the truth the way soldiers did, with clarity and finality. "I didn't want a handout. I wanted calories. And I wanted to not die that night." The courtroom door opened quietly. A man entered, mid-60s, square jaw, crew cut, still intact though his hair had grayed. He wore a faded green blazer with a small pin, a bronze eagle over crossed rifles. Whitaker stood again. "Colonel Thomas DeWitt," he said. Retired, but still active in VA affairs. I asked him to come." Martin looked up and met the colonel's eyes. Something flinched behind his ribs. "Sergeant Bedingfield," DeWitt said, stepping forward. "Didn't expect to find you in this place." "Didn't expect to be found at all, sir." DeWitt nodded slowly. "We tried. After you rotated home, your file got scrambled. Medical discharge was never finalized. VA lost you in the system. I raised hell, never got an answer." "I didn't raise hell," Martin replied. "I just stopped talking." The colonel reached into his coat and pulled out a manila folder. "Your service record, and something else. Benefits package. Backdated. You were owed a pension and VA housing access starting in 2011. Martin blinked. "You mean someone finally listened. The judge called me last night after seeing your name on the docket. He said he needed to verify something. I spent half the night calling contacts and digging through archives. Took a while to find it. Bureaucracy's not built to remember people like you, Sergeant." Angela cleared her throat, more gently this time. "Your Honor, I withdraw the motion for detention." Whitaker's eyes didn't leave Martin. "I thought you might." DeWitt laid the folder on the defense table, then looked Martin in the eye. "You still got that limp?" Martin nodded. "Good. That means you're still alive, and that means it's not too late." For the first time in years, Martin Bedingfield's chest ached with something other than hunger. It was heavier than any rucksack he'd ever carried. It was memory. It was grief. It was the weight of knowing he hadn't been forgotten, after all. Not completely. The judge picked up his gavel, then paused. "This court finds no public interest in prosecuting a man the system failed for over a decade. Charges are dismissed. Sergeant Bedingfield, you're free to go. And you'll leave here today with someone from the VA to help you start again." Martin didn't move. Not right away. He stood like someone waking from anesthesia, unsure if the dream had ended or just begun. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and old paint. Martin sat on the edge of the bed, stiff-backed, wearing clean clothes that didn't belong to him. A plain gray hoodie, new jeans with a scratchy tag still digging into his hip, and socks that felt too soft, almost artificial. His boots, long since rotted through, had been thrown out 2 hours ago. He didn't ask where the new ones came from. He didn't ask for anything. Across from him, Colonel DeWitt leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His posture was still military, still precise. The man never slouched. Even now, watching over a broken soldier he hadn't seen in 15 years, he stood like he was about to inspect a battalion. "You hungry yet?" DeWitt asked. Martin shrugged. "I ate. A protein bar and a styrofoam cup of soup doesn't count as eating. I'm not used to much. That's going to change." Martin didn't reply. The VA social worker had stepped out to make calls, something about emergency placement and paperwork. It all blurred together. Martin barely remembered the judge's ruling. It had happened, hadn't it? He remembered the gavel, the look in Whitaker's eyes, the colonel stepping through the courtroom door like a ghost from another life. And now? Here. He glanced at the window. Pittsburgh looked different from the 6th floor. Cleaner, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "You're still carrying it," DeWitt said, his voice low. Martin's jaw tightened. "Carrying what?" "The war. It never left." "No, it didn't. But now you've got a second chance, and the first thing you need to know is that you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Martin turned his head, slowly. "That's easy to say when you don't sleep under a bridge. I've seen plenty of bridges, Sergeant. You ever wake up with frost on your face?" DeWitt looked away for a second. "No." "Then don't talk like you understand." The colonel didn't flinch. He just nodded, letting the silence settle. After a while, Martin exhaled. "Sorry. No need. I didn't come here to lecture. I came because your name never sat right on that missing list." Martin rubbed his hands together. They were still rough, still split at the knuckles from cold nights and cracked pavement. "You were good, Martin. Quiet, steady. The kind of soldier everyone counted on because you didn't break under pressure. I should have found you sooner." but didn't want to be found. DeWitt stepped forward. Why? Martin shrugged again, a gesture far too small for the weight behind it. Because I didn't come back the same. No one does. I mean, I didn't deserve to come back. DeWitt's voice dropped into steel. Don't finish that sentence. Martin's eyes met his. You didn't see what I saw. I saw plenty. I left a man behind. Nolan Myers. It was my call. I picked the wrong flank. If I hadn't, you think war is clean? You think it's some math equation where you save everyone if you do it right? We lost Nolan because we were in a meat grinder, not because you picked the wrong direction. He was a soldier. He knew the risks. Martin's hands shook. I hear him at night. So do I. The door creaked open. The social worker, Kelly, stepped inside with a clipboard in her hands and polite urgency in her voice. She smiled like someone trained to smile around pain. Mr. Bedingfield, she said, we've found temporary placement for you. Martin didn't move. It's a transitional housing center, she continued. Small, clean, 5 other veterans there. You'd have your own bed, hot meals, counseling options if you choose to accept them. Martin didn't respond. Kelly smiled again, softer this time. You'd have a roof, Martin. He stood slowly. I don't have any stuff. You do now. It's waiting in the car. DeWitt picked up a plain olive duffel bag by the chair. Some basics. We'll add more. Martin reached for it, hesitated, then took it. They didn't speak as they made their way down the hall. The VA hospital wasn't large, but it had that echo of government buildings. Empty, fluorescent, humming with unseen wires and ticking clocks. They passed rooms filled with old men on oxygen, a younger vet with a service dog curled beneath his chair, and a nurse changing a wound dressing. It smelled like war's leftovers. Outside, the wind had picked up. Gray skies stretched overhead like concrete, but Martin barely noticed. The air was dry. Not freezing. It was almost kind. DeWitt held the car door for him. Martin climbed in slowly, wincing as his knees adjusted to real movement again. You'll stay the night, DeWitt said. Tomorrow, we go to the VA office. We'll get your benefits restored. Medical, dental, housing. This place had 5 other vets? That's right. Martin looked at him. They like talking? Some do, some don't. I don't want a support group. Good. They're not looking for one either. But they'll know what it means when you stare at the wall too long after breakfast. The car started. Martin stared out the window as the city rolled past. Bridges, old brick buildings, steam curling from sewer grates, the occasional silhouette of someone carrying a bag like he used to. He didn't know what tomorrow would be, but for the first time in over a decade it felt like he had a map again. The first night in the transitional house was harder than Martin expected. The bed was warm, sure, clean sheets, soft pillow, even a nightstand with a small lamp. But something about the silence rattled him more than the roar of traffic or the hiss of steam grates. There were no sirens, no footsteps scraping on alley cement, no distant hum of city machinery, just breath. His. And someone else's down the hall. He lay still, arms folded across his chest like a soldier in a casket. Old habits die harder than most things. Around midnight, the nightmares crept back. Hedges of memory, flashes of Nolan Myers's face, the burning metal of the Humvee and the radio static that never cleared. Martin woke up in a cold sweat, but when he sat up, he didn't reach for a bottle. There wasn't one. Just a paper cup of water by the lamp, already poured by someone who'd known better. That simple kindness anchored him. The next morning began with eggs. Not powdered ones like in the chow lines back overseas. Real scrambled eggs, seasoned, fluffy. Bacon, toast, coffee that wasn't burnt. The man at the stove was named Leonard, Navy, Gulf War. Quiet, same as Martin. Just nodded when he passed him the plate. "Name's on the fridge," Leonard said. "Write it down if you want seconds." Martin scrawled his name, awkwardly, like it was the first time in years. And maybe it was. Martin Bedingfield. His handwriting didn't look familiar. But there it was, in ink. Later that day, Colonel DeWitt returned. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just jeans and a jacket, but Martin still sat up a little straighter when he walked in. "You ready?" the colonel asked. Martin didn't answer, but he stood and grabbed the olive duffel. The VA office was a gray building with automatic doors and flickering lights. Inside, it smelled like paper, printer toner, and linoleum floors soaked in years of anxiety. But the staff moved quickly, faster than Martin expected. His benefits file had been expedited. Someone had pushed it through. Probably Whitaker, maybe DeWitt. Martin didn't ask. An older woman behind the desk handed him a folder. "Medical, mental health, housing stipend, retroactive pay. You'll need to sign here, here, and here." Martin paused over the forms. "This is real?" he asked quietly. She looked up, puzzled. "Yes, Mr. Bedingfield, it's all yours. Been yours for a long time. We just had to fix the paperwork." He signed. With trembling hands, he reclaimed pieces of himself that had been scattered in forgotten filing cabinets and dusty databases. Each signature was like planting a flag. That night, he didn't wake from nightmares. Instead, he sat with Leonard on the back porch. A couple of the other guys came out too. Roddy, a former Air Force mechanic with a dry wit, and Mullick, a Marine, who barely talked but always nodded at the right moments. No one asked for war stories. No one bragged or cried or made it weird. They just watched the stars come out. Leonard passed a thermos of coffee around. Someone laughed at a joke Martin didn't hear. And when it came back to him, he took a sip and said, "I used to think I'd died out there, that maybe everything since was just hell." Roddy looked at him, eyebrows raised. "Still might be." Everyone chuckled, even Martin. But then he added, "No, this is something else." The following weeks moved fast. Martin started helping out around the house, fixing the back steps, cleaning gutters, replacing the old wiring in the kitchen light fixture. He didn't say much while he worked, but the others noticed. And when a new guy arrived, a young vet with a 1,000-yard stare and no bags, Martin was the first one to make him a sandwich. They didn't talk. He just handed it over and sat beside him. Sometimes that was enough. One afternoon, DeWitt stopped by again. This time he brought an envelope. Martin opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a letter, formal, stamped, sealed in thick cream-colored paper. An invitation. "You're being honored," the colonel said. "Memorial Day. Downtown ceremony. They're recognizing your service. And what happened in that courtroom?" "I didn't ask for this," Martin said, voice low. "No one said you did. But sometimes a man has to be seen, especially when others are watching." Martin ran his fingers over the edge of the envelope. "I'm not good with crowds. You won't be alone." Memorial Day came fast. The city dressed itself in flags and honor guards, streets lined with chairs, children waving miniature stars and stripes, a stage near the river with rows of white folding chairs, most filled with local dignitaries and uniformed officials. Martin stood behind the curtain backstage, adjusting the collar of his jacket. It wasn't military anymore, just a simple navy blazer with a small ribbon pinned near his chest. He didn't wear it for show. He wore it for the men who couldn't. "Ready?" came the voice beside him. Judge Daniel Whitaker stepped forward, looking different now, more human, less robed authority, more solemn friend. Martin nodded. "Let's get this over with." When they stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. Martin flinched at first, his spine went stiff, his shoulders tightened, but then he saw the faces. Veterans standing, saluting, families wiping tears, children clapping with wide eyes. The world had seen a ghost and finally remembered the man inside it. Whitaker took the mic first. He didn't read from notes. He spoke plainly. "This man once saved my life, and when I had the power to return the favor, I almost missed my chance. But justice isn't always about law. Sometimes it's about listening. It's about looking deeper." Martin Bedingfield didn't ask for praise. He didn't seek reward. He just wanted to survive. And today, he stands not as a man on trial, but as a man restored. The applause rose again. Martin stepped forward, looked out at the crowd, then down at his hands. For years they'd clutched cardboard signs and trash bags. Today they held a plaque etched with his name, clean, untouched by rain. He spoke only one sentence. "I was gone for a while, but I'm back now." And the crowd stood once more. When he returned to the house that night, the porch light had been replaced. The bulb glowed soft yellow. Safe, familiar. Martin stepped inside, closed the door gently behind him, and for the first time in a very long time, he slept through the night. Without fear, without hunger, and without ghosts, he was home.